Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips, which is brought to you by WellnessForumHealth, the Wellness Forum Institute, and Make Americans Free Again. A couple quick announcements. First of all, Dr. Mila's Vision Improvement class starts this Saturday. This is a marvelous program that enables you to actually improve your vision naturally. So we've all been told that as we age, our vision starts to decline, and in the absence of intervention, that can be true. But we offered this program last year, and it was astounding how many people reported during the class series that their vision had improved. One person confirmed by an ophthalmologist who changed her prescription as a result. So if you're interested in that, send me an email. The other thing is I'm super excited about our upcoming Cancer Summit, March 22nd. This is going to cover everything from alternative treatments in clinics to how to mitigate the effects of conventional treatment to analyzing treatment options, practitioners, alternatives, and we just added another special guest. I'm going to have several special guest speakers. Dr. Gracie Yuen will discuss water fasting for cancer patients and also sympathetic dominance and its role in the development of cancer and other diseases. We're going to talk about the survival mentality. You're going to hear from cancer patients going through this process themselves. It's going to be incredible. First time we've ever done anything like this, and I'm just very, very excited. So I'll have some more speakers to announce. Every week I'll feature one. And I think you're going to really be glad you participated in this program because almost everybody knows somebody who has cancer and is going through the process of figuring out what to do. And God forbid, if you ever end up in this situation, armed with knowledge is the way that you want to be. All right, speaking of armed with knowledge, I have a lot of information to share with you today, and I'm stepping out on a limb to post it here for reasons that I'll explain to you. But I'll just start by saying people often ask me who I follow, who they should follow, and my answer is I don't follow anybody, and I don't think you should either. Don't take anybody's word for anything, particularly in healthcare, including mine. Learn to discern for yourself the truth about everything from how to stay healthy to what to do if you have stage 4 breast cancer. The next common and related question is, where do I get my information? And the answer is from medical and scientific journals, but with a really important caveat. I start with the knowledge that about 95% of what's been published during the last few decades is garbage. So I'm very discerning as I analyze published data and arrive at conclusions, and you should be too. I recently received a link to a newly published peer-reviewed editorial that illustrates why both you and I should be super skeptical about new information, about all information, and which also explains why so many health professionals and researchers continue to make recommendations and issue statements that are patently false. I was frankly surprised to see that the article was published since it's so critical. The authors call on the scientific community to entertain contrarian ideas due to the conflicts of interest and groupthink that is so common in medical journals these days. Having been a contrarian for the entirety of my almost 30-year career, this was a welcome breath of fresh air, and it was a resounding endorsement of our business model, which is teaching consumers to become informed so that they can tell their doctors and other health professionals what to do instead of following instructions. I'm going to share with you an important excerpt. Quote, scientists in the peer-reviewed literature are as influenced by groupthink processes as by dispassionate rationality. There is the open-minded methodology of science, following data and evidence wherever it leads, even if surprising, contrarian, or disconcerting. And then there is the science, which in recent years we were told to follow as established, settled, and having the imprimatur of authority. The authors report that power and profitability of drug companies has enabled them to contribute to and exert incredible control over research and universities and medical education and medical journals and political parties, regulators, medical associations, and even international organizations like the World Health Organization. It is through these methods that medical groupthink is achieved. The amount of money drug and vaccines makers have to invest in purchasing influence is huge, but the misbehavior associated with their successful influence takes your breath away. The industry has paid $122 billion in criminal fines since the year 2000. In spite of this, these companies oversee their own clinical trials and provide most of the funding to agencies like FDA that are supposed to regulate their products. Journal editors have acknowledged that their publications are a component of Big Pharma's marketing strategy, and that editors, peer reviewers, and doctors receive money from drug companies. Most of the payments are not disclosed. All of this has resulted in gatekeepers for the science who determine what is and is not acceptable scientific thinking, and anyone who's skeptical is deemed anti-science. Massive efforts are undertaken to discredit dissenters from scientific groupthink. I'm one of the people who's been the target of this behavior, even from my own community, the plant-based community, when I dared to veer from the groupthink regarding masks and COVID vaccines. The authors rightly state that contrarian views are needed and scientific debate should be the method used to arrive at conclusions about any issue. This is starting to backfire, thankfully. Public trust in public health continues to decline. And the recent 520-page report from Congress on COVID-19 fully or partly vindicated contrarian perspectives like mine on many aspects of public health messaging during the pandemic. This is one of the reasons, by the way, we scheduled the Cancer Summit this year. Cancer patients are different than patients with type 2 diabetes or hypertension. They're more frightened for good reason, and the decisions are incredibly important. A person can make poor decisions about how to address many chronic conditions like obesity or coronary artery disease and likely will stay alive for a while, long enough to realize the need to change course, but not so much for the cancer patient who has little wiggle room for bad decision-making. With the possible exception of vaccines, there is nothing more profitable for drug companies than a new cancer drug, and there's no requirement that it extend life for a single day. Surrogate markers like progression-free survival time, the time between when the cancer is declared to be in remission and when it starts progressing again, are enough to gain FDA approval. So once again, if anybody you know is dealing with cancer or a family member has cancer, our March 22nd program is for you. Now, all of this brings me to the next item, which is information that challenges the mantra and the groupthink we've heard for decades about vaccines. They're safe and effective. Groupthink and people like Mr. Fauci, who claim they are the science, which should scare you half to death, have been successful in marginalizing any dissent to the party lines. Safe and effective, safe and effective. In fact, if you repeat something enough, it does become almost known as a truth that we should all accept. So I found a peer-reviewed article that begins by stating that vaccinations required for school attendance have been increased threefold in recent decades. An important note concerning this increase in required vaccines followed the 1986 immunity law passed by Congress that absolves vaccine makers from any financial liability for injuries and deaths caused by their products. No other industry in the world is given such favorable treatment, and it's hard to imagine the consequences that would result if they were. I mean, can you imagine if people who built office buildings and car makers, no matter how shoddy the products, no matter how many people got injured by buildings falling down or cars plowing into other cars going at high speeds on the freeways, and there would be no consequences to pay? That's what we have with this particular industry. Many studies show that vaccinated children are significantly more likely to be diagnosed with bacterial infections, allergies, and neurodevelopmental disorders. We'll call them NDDs. This is what a longitudinal study conducted in a pediatric practice in Oregon clearly showed, and the response from the science was to revoke his medical license. Groupthink, as appalling as it is alive and well. By the way, as an aside, our nonprofit is defending this doctor because we don't think that groupthink should prevail. Well, what makes this study particularly interesting is that it looked at the association between vaccination and NDDs in 9-year-old children covered by Medicaid. The analysis covered claims for 47,155 children, and here's what it showed. Vaccination was associated with significantly increased odds for all measured NDDs. Among children born preterm and vaccinated, 39.9% were diagnosed with at least one NDD, compared to only 15.7% of those born preterm and unvaccinated. The relative risk of autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, increased according to the number of doctor visits that included vaccinations. Children with just one vaccine visit were 1.7 times more likely to have been diagnosed with ASD than the unvaccinated, whereas those with 11 or more visits were 4.4 times more likely to have been diagnosed with ASD than those with no visit for vaccination. These are stunning numbers. So the authors note several things. Based on the assumed safety of vaccination, preterm newborns are vaccinated on the same schedule as children born at term. The association between preterm birth and NDD could therefore be due in part to the accompanying vaccinations rather than to preterm birth itself. Given the current expanded and accelerated vaccination schedule, a link between vaccination and ASD could be due to the cumulative impact of all preceding vaccinations rather than to a specific vaccine alone, which is probably one of the reasons why individual studies haven't shown these results. ASD and other NDDs could be triggered by the last vaccine administered or by one or more of a series of vaccinations. The science of vaccines is focused on protection against specific pathogens and specific vaccines, while the overall impact of the vaccination schedule on children's health has been left unexplored, largely because of the science. You're not allowed to question it. The results of this study add to a growing body of evidence raising concerns about the safety of the current vaccination schedule and its possible contribution to the rising rates of neurodevelopmental disorders. This study is not an outlier, guys. And if you haven't read or learned about this before, the reason is the power of the drug and vaccine makers and the government partners who work with them to dictate scientific groupthink, public health officials and members of Congress who are all well compensated by Big Pharma. There are 3 pharma lobbyists for every member of Congress and every member of the US Senate. And censorship. I've been the victim of this, and it didn't start with COVID. Senator Adam Schiff wrote to social media companies starting in 2017 demanding that they censor, and they did. Now, they're not going to do it anymore, supposedly, and I guess we're testing that theory here. While former President Biden lamented that social media companies weren't going to fact check anymore because who appointed them, God, and the arbiter of everything that is true or not true. Many of us are welcoming the opportunity to speak freely about what we know. So I'm going to come back to our business model, which is the antithesis of the science and groupthink. It's the opposite of that. We teach people how to think for themselves. We teach them how to read the medical literature and arrive at conclusions, and they're often much more informed, our members are, than their health professionals, and they feel free to say no to things that don't make any sense to them at all. And so one thing I'll mention is in February, I start my annual research and writing course. I only offer it once a year. It's an 8-month course, and it teaches people how to do what I do, to read the information and come up with objective results. And so you can become an outlier like me. And by the way, I'm super proud to be an outlier. I think that anybody who claims to be part of scientific groupthink, I'm embarrassed for them. All the fancy degrees and education you have, and the best that you can do is say, I'm with the cabal. It's kind of pathetic when you think about it, yeah? So if you want to learn to be an outlier, take my research and writing course. It's tough. You have to learn how to dig up information and write papers and abandon ideas that you thought were right when you find information that challenges them. But it's a fun process. I enjoy my work for that reason. It's fun to dig up information, arrive at truthful conclusions. So anyway, keep in mind, Dr. Mila's class starts on Saturday. Cancer Summit, March 22nd, Research and Writing next month. And as always, we welcome new members and new health professionals to our training program because we're going to build a healthcare model. We are building a healthcare model based on being informed. All right, that's it for today. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it, and I'll be back to you on Thursday with more news. Thank you for watching.